Hi everyone, today we will be discussing a talky but extremely important video. As you may have noticed, it is titled The 10 Rules of the Loud Master. Why do we need this video? Well, I often receive requests such as, Ilya, how can we make our mix very loud during the mastering process? The truth is, there is no simple answer to this question. You cannot just say, use this plugin and it will be loud. It doesn't work that way. To achieve a loud master, you need to follow some crucial steps, which I am going to share with you now. Let's begin. First things first. Arrangement. I know it may sound strange, but the way your track is arranged, the choice of instruments, and the distribution of elements across the musical ranges all play a significant role in achieving a loud master. Surprisingly, having fewer elements in the arrangement and minimizing clashes can result in a bigger, more massive, and louder sound. The more elements you have, the harder it becomes to make the mix loud. This issue becomes even more apparent when there are many parallel elements occupying the same musical range. No frequency conflicts can be solved without a competent approach to arranging your track. Number 2. Prioritizing elements in each spectrum band. This is a simple concept. Mentally divide the entire spectrum into sections. For instance, sub-bottom, bottom, low-mid, mid, middle, upper-mid, and top. It's important to determine which element takes priority within each of these sections. Who is the main focus in the sub-bottom spectrum, the bass or the drums? Who dominates the bass spectrum, the bass or the drums? Who stands out in the middle, the bass or the synths, guitars or baritonal vocals? Who takes control in the upper middle, the snares, vocals or guitars, and so on? Once you establish the priority elements within your mix and spectrum, achieving loudness becomes much easier. Number 3. Working with peaks on individual channels. Why do we do this? To ensure that sharp peaks without significant musical information on individual channels do not trigger our master chain, including saturation and limiting. We want to prepare our individual channels in a way that eliminates excessive sharp peaks. While it may not always be necessary, it is more often a requirement in modern commercial production. Techniques such as clipping, limiting, saturation, and peak control can help achieve this. Personally, I utilize plugins like Invisible Limiter GI in Clipper mode or Softtube Overstare to minimize sharp transients and prevent individual tracks from containing excessive sharp information. Number 4. Understanding the necessary use of EQ for finalizing individual channels. Each track has its own unique frequency content, and EQ adjustments play a crucial role in achieving a cohesive and balanced mix. Just like when dealing with peaks on individual channels, it is important to use EQ in an effective manner to eliminate any unwanted frequencies, enhance desired frequencies, and ensure each channel sits well within the mix. EQ can also help in carving out space for each individual element, reducing masking issues, enhancing clarity, and ultimately contributing to making the mix louder. Number 5. Compression and peak control on instrument subgroups. It may seem obvious, but there is often a tendency to compress and limit subgroups such as drums or percussion, while neglecting sharp peak information and dynamic range control within subgroups containing vocals, electric guitars, synths, or other instruments. I make it a point to carefully control the dynamic range by applying subtle compression with a ratio ranging from 1.5 to 1 down to 2 to 1. If any element within the subgroup jumps too much in the mix, failing to maintain its intended position, it indicates the need for additional compression in the subgroup or sometimes within the individual instrument. Limiting or clipping can also be employed similarly. I prefer using plugins like Invisible Limiter, Pro L2 from FabFilter, Kazrog Clipper, or Softtube Overstare to gently tame transient information within subgroups by reducing it by 1.5 to 2 decibels. Reimagining your arrangements, prioritizing elements in the spectrum bands, working with peaks on individual channels, important EQ adjustments, and effective compression and peak control on subgroups of instruments are all essential steps to achieve a louder mix. I hope these rules help you on your journey to mastering and create impeccably loud masters. Remember, there are no shortcuts to loudness, and it requires a combination of careful techniques applied at multiple stages of the production process. Keep experimenting, refining, and honing your skills to create incredible sounding music. Number 6 refers to the concept of automation in music. Automation can be a powerful tool that allows us to achieve amazing results. In my opinion, automation in music is akin to animation. Without it, a mix can feel static, much like a still picture. However, with the use of automation, we can breathe life into this static image and transform it into something dynamic, such as a cartoon or a movie. Automation is a way to animate what was previously stagnant. One of the key benefits of automation is the ability to guide the listener's attention. With careful automation, certain elements can come into focus, while others recede into the background, creating a pleasing ebb and flow. This macro and micro-scale automation technique also contributes to a louder mix. By skillfully implementing automation, we can prevent the mix from becoming cluttered, with multiple sources and elements competing for dominance. It is said that the human brain can only process 4 elements at once, and automation helps simplify the listener's perception of music while packing the arrangement elements in a way that makes the mix richer, fuller, and ultimately louder. Frequency conflicts are another important consideration in sound engineering. Often, we are told that the ability to resolve these conflicts is a crucial skill. However, I believe this perspective is misguided. Removing frequency conflicts is a task that can be easily accomplished even by someone with limited expertise. It is not the defining skill of a professional sound engineer. Nonetheless, in cases where an arrangement is not well structured and contains numerous elements competing in the same frequency range, addressing these conflicts can certainly enhance the clarity, loudness, and overall activity of the mix. It is just one of the tools at a sound engineer's disposal. In conclusion, both automation and effective management of frequency conflicts play important roles in achieving a satisfying mix. Automation breathes life into a static composition and helps steer the listener's attention. Meanwhile, resolving frequency conflicts enhances the clarity of the mix. By skillfully utilizing these techniques, we can create a mix that is not only louder but also more engaging for the audience. I pay very close attention to the following areas. I have even in the default preset for the Pro Q3 there is always 60 Hz, 120 Hz, 300 Hz, 500, 1000, 2.5, 8, 12. Next are the B frequencies. I try to pay attention to these areas and also pay attention to whether there is a clutter of multiple instruments or mix elements within these parts of the spectrum and indeed within any parts of the spectrum. Thinking about who is the prioritized element in a particular area, as we talked about a little bit earlier. In general, we don't forget about working with frequency conflicts, but please don't think that this is the most important thing. One more important thing. When eliminating frequency conflicts, don't forget, when equalizing one instrument, to listen to how the other instrument changes, which I have also said 1,000 times, but I will say 1,000 times for the first time. Number 8. The use of clipping filters. It would seem that everything is clear. Well, you cut the bottom everywhere, and that's it. Actually, for me, the logic and philosophy behind using clipping filters is like this. I try to use trimming filters, first of all, not only at the very bottom but also at the very top, because our mastering chain or mastering engineer's mastering chain in general does not understand what information is a musical component and what information is just, well, roughly speaking, frequency garbage. Yes, what is there below, conditionally, and 15 Hz, yes, in general, and 20 can rarely be qualitatively transmitted with the help of the playback system. Just as anything above 16 to 17 kHz is rarely heard by anyone over the age of 25. And yet, there are people who do hear it. It's not about that. It's about the fact that for me, the final stage of preparing a mix for a master is, let's say, framing of the mix I'm working on. That's why I start with the master section. If suddenly I need to do some filtering on the subgroups, I do it on the subgroups, and only at the very last moment I do it on the channels. Why? Because any filtering and the higher filter steepness we use, the more phase anomalies any signal filtering leads to, both at low frequencies and at high frequencies. But at high frequencies, it's not as noticeable. As a general rule, I try to pick filters by ear that sound, in my opinion, with minimal sort of minimizing the damage to the mix that I'm working on. And I pick the cutoff frequency by the same logic. It's worth remembering that the more sub-low frequency information we have in the mix, the harder it will be to make the master loud. Keep that in mind. It seems to me that high-pass filters are also necessary, because it often happens that in tracking, in recording, there is extra high-frequency garbage or noise in the part of the spectrum where there is nothing useful in the instrument itself. don't forget to pay attention to this and clean these areas carefully. I would like to remind you that using filters with high steepness of decline, like 96 decibels per octave, as they like to show in rapper tutorials in TikTok, causes total damage to the phase response of the signal. You can see what it is in my other videos. Next. Number 9. Using multiple limiters and a clipper or clippers. Yeah, that's a real thing. It sounds a little bit weird, but squeezing a louder mix while retaining more detail can sometimes be accomplished by using a chain of multiple limiters or a clipper and a limiter. I do this most often with either the invisible limiter clipper, the Casro K-clip, then the invisible limiter G3, or the IK multimedia stealth limiter. I like the result that comes out that way. There are also limiters that have a built-in clipper. For example, the invisible limiter G3, which for me is one of my favorite limiters, and the stealth limiter competes with the invisible limiter G3 all the time. There's a clipper section and a final limiter section. In my opinion, this combination works best in modern music, allowing you to balance between a dirty, saturated clipped sound and getting extra volume by limiting the master. 10th point, the selection of the instruments we use. I don't mean musical instruments, but limiters, compressors, equalizers. Yes, it would seem, what difference does it make what we use? Everybody's talking about it. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people say that it doesn't matter which instrument we use to achieve the result. Yeah, but I prefer to choose a different final limiter for each track to find what works best. Stealth limiter, AOM invisible limiter, ozone, Pro L2, something else. The same way I pick up EQs, compressors. Not depending on what I like or what YouTube said, but listening to how each particular instrument affects the music I'm working with. There are times when a completely unexpected choice turns out to be the right one and the one that, in my subjective opinion, sounds best in that particular case. That's why I advise you to be attentive to the selection of the sound engineer's instruments and try not to get stuck in the same one. Just to expand your palette and diversity of ideas in the process of music production. And number 11. Although the video is called 10 Rules of the Loud Master. What is the right volume to turn in a mastered song after all? Today, it's common to say that the loudness war is long over. It's perfectly safe to pour the master. -14 lufs. Unfortunately, we often have to deal with sites that do not have any volume optimization algorithms at all. Especially some domestic sites sin this. But not some, it turns out all of them. In the case of YouTube, for example, if we upload a loud master, I don't know, -8 or -6 loft, YouTube will just take that overcompressed brick and make it quieter to its standard level of -14. So we'll kill the dynamics of the track, we'll make it lacking in detail, and YouTube will still make it quieter, and it won't sound as loud as we wanted it to. That's why I prefer to make a separate version for YouTube, more dynamic and wider. But for streaming, unfortunately, so far, especially when working with Russian artists or with artists who work with Russian streaming services, we have to give the master most often around -7 lofts, which in the loudest places reach -6, -5. Yes, it sounds sacrilegious, I realize that. I try to make the master for streaming to be -12, -13 lofts, but unfortunately, not with all genres and not in all situations, such low values are acceptable. Although subjectively, in my opinion, this is exactly what is needed for the music to be perceived as dynamic as possible and sound normal within the streaming. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it was interesting for you. Subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, write your questions in the comments. I'll answer them nervously, as I always do. That's all for now.